Don't you just love it when you let one of your tiny little children borrow one of your Marvel Legends action figures and then like 3 seconds later they bring it back to you with no head? Like they have no idea what happened to the Marvel Legends head sculpt. It just didn't walk away and disappear. Clearly they did something with it, but they can't quite explain where it's at. It's just kind of like one of the hazards of having children as well as collecting action figures, I guess. The funny thing is they never lose hands or anything crazy like that. It's always just the head. They bring me back just, the body mold without a headpiece. I don't understand how that happens. I don't understand if they're like articulating the head sculpt a little bit too much, if they're flushing them down the toilet. I have no idea. I'll be brutally honest with you guys. I do have a tiny little pile of Marvel Legends slash DC Multiverse action figures that I usually let my children play around with. I don't know if that's like a crime against humanity, but it just is what it is. It's like stuff that I don't see myself displaying, or figures that maybe I didn't necessarily love or I'm not passionate about. I'll usually just let them, use it whenever I'm working on a review or just working on something in my little action figure display area. But anyways, all jokes aside, or I should say all facts aside, today I wanted to talk about something that is pretty interesting. I've been kind of thinking about making a video like this for quite some time, but I just never really got around to it. And it's not going to be like a full-on edited video. It's going to be another one of these rant videos where I just give you guys my personal take on something. So if you guys want like something a little bit more edited, I guess you guys can just wait around. For the most part, most of our videos are very, chopped up and edited and put together. But sometimes I just want to rant. I just want to sit and let, my frustrations out and just kind of vent through it. So in today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about selling action figures on eBay. And look, if you're a collector and you've been collecting for any period of time, like let's say more than a year, and you're like a legitimate collector, like you're buying close to 100, action figures on a yearly basis, or at least close to that. Sometimes you collect stuff that maybe you're not as passionate, you don't necessarily love, or you picked up something. If you're a content creator, you make a habit of this. Sometimes you'll pick up action figures just for the sake of the review, and then later you're like, well, I don't really need the figure. Or sometimes you actually finish off like a little team or a little, portion of your display, and you're just not very happy with it. You want to move on from those figures. And one of the other big issues is display space. Sometimes you just don't want to have stuff in bins or in boxes. You actually want to have it up on your shelf or your IKEA detolf or whatever, however it is that you display your figures. And sometimes if you're running out of room, you just have to clear up some stuff. And so from time to time, you sell your action figures. And I've gone into the habit, or at least I did get into the habit when I first started collecting, of selling on eBay. And I'm going to tell you guys exactly why it is that you should not sell, or you should, like, eBay should be your last alternative when it comes to selling action figures. One of the bigger issues you're going to run into are just absolutely buffoons. Like, these people are incredibly toxic out in the community. And this just happened to me not too long ago. There's actually people with multiple different accounts. It's the same person, it's the same individual. Essentially what they'll do to you is they'll try to decimate you, and I'm assuming this is like actual competition. I reached out to like the eBay support staff, but they again were completely useless. But these people would essentially, like, if you have auctions, they actually go into your auctions, purchase all of your items, never pay you, and just do that consistently for like a few months. Sometimes they'll even throw on some really bad ratings. I'm assuming it's either a competitor or McFarlane himself just messing with you because you have Marvel Legends in your display. But seriously, there's people that go out of their way to do stuff like that. eBay also has some really weird tactics of making more money off of you. Like for example, this whole idea of you paying extra for one of your listings being promoted more, which is really weird. I mean, look, if somebody searches for something, if I'm the website, the best case scenario is you actually showcase what it is that they search for. Like if somebody looks up Marvel Legends Spider-Man action figures, just because somebody has a promotion on their listing, it shouldn't pop up a Venom or a random Carnage Marvel Legends action figure. But if you go on eBay and you go through like a few pages, and let's say again, if you search for Marvel Legends Spider-Man action figures, from time to time you'll get a few of these random listings that make absolutely no sense. It's not a Marvel Legends. Sometimes it's like a Marvel Select, or sometimes it's like a Mesco or a Mafex, and you wonder, why is this being thrown into my search results? Well, pretty straightforward. whoever made that listing paid a little bit extra for a promotion, and that means that their item is going to be thrust to the forefront. It's buffoonery. I think it's dirty. It's shady from eBay. The fact that you have to pay extra for you to sell your item. I think everybody should be on an even keel. And when somebody is selling something, or when somebody is looking to buy something in this particular case, they should be able to just find that one particular item. They shouldn't be bombarded with like 1,000 different listings, and then like half of them are not even exactly what it is that they're looking for, especially if they go and they refine the search. Like if they actually go out of their way and say, like, 2021 Spider-Man Marvel Legends action figure, like it should only showcase that exact same item. Unfortunately, because of this new promotional features, sometimes you're going to be thrown to the back burner, unless you're willing to pay the extra to sell your action figures. And in most cases, we're not going to do that, because we're already kind of taking the loss on some of these figures. We're not resellers, we're not scalpers, we're just trying to sell stuff in our collection that is just collecting dust. And so it just doesn't make sense for us to go out of our way to do stuff like that. The biggest issue that I've personally had when selling collectibles on eBay, and I've actually had two different instances of people doing this, pretty straightforward. And I'll give you guys an example. I was selling a comic book lot 1 through 5. I go on eBay, I post the item, somebody purchases it, I ship it to them, blah blah, so on and so forth. They receive the items and they claim, according to them, that the issue, and hilariously enough, it's the issue that has the most value. It's like the number one issue, which was the most key of the entire lot. They claim that they did not receive the comic book. So what did they say? I want to return the entire lot. They return two through 4, and I'm stuck with taking a big giant loss on it. There was another situation where I shipped an entire lot of action figures, and interestingly enough, the same exact situation happened. They returned to me all of the items that were, lower in value, and they just kept the one that had the most value, claiming that there was a figure missing in the lot. And look, this would be pretty simple. I mean, there are some very easy things that eBay can do to properly investigate this type of situation. When they print out a label, or when I ship it out, there's an actual exact weight of the item or the package that I send out to the consumer. It's pretty straightforward, okay? All that the buyer has to do is print out the return label, add some tape to it, seal it back up, and then ship it back to me in the exact same way that I shipped it to them, okay? It's pretty easy. eBay can just go in there, make a tiny little investigation, and just as simple as this, if the weight does not add up, if there's a discrepancy in the weight, let's say I ship an item and, let's just say out of nowhere, it's 2.7 pounds, right? 2.7 is what I ship it to them. 2 pounds and 7 ounces or whatever the case may be. I don't know. I'm not very good at math, but let's say I ship it to them at 2.7 and the buyer returns it to me at, let's say, 3.1. Shouldn't there be like a giant red flag? Like what did the seller add to the package to make it way more? In the case of the comic books, they did something like this, where they added just some random wrapping paper to like compensate for, I'm assuming, the weight that they thought was going to be missing from the package. The exact same thing happened with the action figure. Because they're trying to compensate, there might be a slight little discrepancy in the weight of the package. They usually add like a little bit of packing paper. Why would you even do that? You literally just have to ship the item the way that I shipped it to you. It's something so simplistic. And by the way, those people that are buying from you are probably going to go ahead and do it again. eBay just doesn't care about this. All they care about is the back end, which is the amount of money that they can make. They're always going to side with the buyer. So if the buyer says that there's something missing, that's the end of the conversation. I mean, it is what it is. Even if you try to find different ways of proving that this individual is lying, and it's always something very minimal like that. Like it's always like the most key issue missing. It's just one comic book, but it's always kind of interesting that it's the most expensive item in that particular lot. So I'm assuming that they just purchase it with the intent of keeping the most valuable item and then shipping the rest back to you. And then guess what? You have to accept the return. Like there's no way around it. You can either offer the seller a partial refund. Let's say if you sold a lot of action figures for $120, and let's say the most valuable action figure is, according to the buyer, missing, then you could, send them back like $30 of that 120 and hope that the seller wants to keep the item. If not, you're going to have to not only receive the figures, take a loss on the figure that isn't in the lot, and then on top of that you actually have to cover the return shipping. So you actually have to cover for that. So you're losing a ton of money, and eBay just doesn't have the inclination. They don't even have the motivation to try to investigate any of these claims. eBay is always going to side with the buyer. Now, this is something else that happened to me and was a little bit more interesting. I don't necessarily know exactly what happened. I shipped a couple of different items. Now, the main reason why I shipped them separately was because it was much faster to ship them that way. The actual buyer would receive these much quicker because of some weight restrictions and things of that nature. If they went over a specific weight, it usually takes a little longer to get to them, and I wasn't going to pay extra to expedite the packages. Not only that, they're pretty cheap to ship, and the boxes that I had at the moment just perfectly fit the collectible. So I shipped them in 2 different boxes. Now, essentially what happened is USPS decided to just only scan one of the boxes. They didn't scan the other one, meaning that if you went through the tracking system, it only showed that one of the items was delivered and the other one was still in transit. Like, I can check to this day, and that item was supposed to have been delivered like 5 years ago, and it would still say in transit. Essentially what happens is these USPS drivers are complete buffoons. They decide, I'm not going to scan both of these packages. Why would I do that? They're going to the same house. And so in this particular case, the buyer made the same exact claim that they had only received one item. I went to USPS, and unfortunately, because I did not buy insurance for the item, which, by the way, again, more buffoonery. Why am I going to buy an insurance for every single item that I ship through them, especially if it's like a $10 Funko Pop, or if it's a Marvel Legends that's like under $15? Why am I going to spend more money on insuring the item? It makes absolutely no sense. And so in this particular case, it's just another one of those losses. I tried to argue that, they had only scanned one of the packages, but eBay's just not having it. If a buyer claims something happened, they're just going to go with that story. Even if you sell, like, I'll give you guys an example. Since I started selling on eBay, and I was in my early 20s, I would sell some of my collectibles here and there. I've gone through different transitions in my life. Like, I at one point had a few Rebel Tech action figures. I collected import figures. I even had some of like the Square Enix giant 10-inch action figures. I absolutely love them. But I've evolved as time has gone by, and I've sold a lot of my collectibles. And let's say within that span of time, I've made maybe like 200 sales on eBay. And I've had 2 or 3 of those incidents, and they're not going to stand by me. Okay. I've had 100 different sales, over 100 different sales. I've never had any issues. And then the one time that a buyer claims that there was an item missing, they're going to side with them. It's absolute buffoonery. And the list goes on of people or eBay just being really shady with their practices. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And by the way, this isn't a free service, and this is what really gets under my skin. If eBay wants us to pay the fee that they're asking us to pay as sellers, I think that there is at least a little bit of responsibility on their side to investigate, right? If this was a free service, or if they were charging me like, 5% to sell an item on their website, I would completely understand. But I think at this point, it's like close to 15%. Like, why am I paying that fee if you're not investigating, if you're not wasting resources or spending resources on investigating a claim from a buyer that is just trying to get a few figures free off of you? It just makes absolutely no sense to me. So look, I'm not here to tell you what to do. At the end of the day, I'm only giving you guys my personal perspective, my personal opinion on things that happen, like my personal experiences. That's all I can do. I can pass those on to you. In my personal opinion, the best option here is to sell through Facebook, is to sell through OfferUp. If you have no other options, if you've exhausted those avenues, then yeah, go ahead, sell on eBay. Take a little bit of risk. Just don't do it as consistently, I would say. It's really risky, and it feels like eBay is always just trying to clean their hands from all of these situations. They're not going to throw their hands in the fire. They're not going to, back anybody. If anything goes wrong through the transaction, the seller is essentially going to be hung high and dry. and they're not going to be able to not even get back the value for their collectibles. Like they're going to lose on shipping, they're going to lose on the actual figure that is not there. It's an absolute joke. And I think it's one of those things that you just have to deal with as a collector. You're going to have to, sell a lot of collectibles as the time goes by. I think there are very few people that keep all of their action figures while they're collecting. Like it's just a pretty basic thing to, like evolve and transition into new collectibles. And so I think it's something that you're going to have to deal with eventually. But in my personal opinion, I think there are better avenues than eBay. I'll give you guys one last example of how they're always going to back up the buyer rather than the seller. Try doing a few eBay auctions and then having people not pay up for whatever the auction ended at. I guarantee you that at no point eBay is going to force any of these quote unquote buyers to actually purchase the item. They're not going to put forth any money. They'll just leave it up there. You have to cancel and relist it. If this were reversed, like if somebody had purchased something from you and then you took a little bit too long to actually ship the item, not only can they give you a bad rating, but then eBay will actually step in and they could either refund the item or they could like strike your entire account, which makes no sense. Like the seller can actually promise to purchase something but then never purchase it, and they can continuously do this over and over. Like they can force you to cancel and relist it, and then maybe if let's say that the auction ends again and then that person decides to not pay you, guess what, you're gonna have to cancel and relist it. But it doesn't work the other way around. If somebody pays for it, there's like an actual time frame where you actually have to ship the item. It makes absolutely no sense. Now, yes, granted, if you're a seller and somebody's purchasing it from you, it's just a matter of ethics. Like, yes, try to ship that as soon as possible. But why isn't there a two-sided road here? Why is it only the seller that is on the hook, but the buyer can consistently do this? They can quote unquote win auctions, and if they change their mind, they just don't pay for the item, and then the actual seller has to again cancel and relist it over and over as many times as possible until they actually find a seller that is willing to pay the actual total for the auction, which I think is, like I said, absolute buffoonery. eBay to me is just one of those last alternatives. If you have no other options, if you've exhausted all other routes, this would be, I guess, your final option. But let me know your thoughts down below. This is just my personal opinion. This is based on my personal experience. Very curious to see what you guys have to say down below. Have you guys ever sold action figures through eBay? Very curious to see what the community has to say. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of rambling action figure content, we actually do it pretty consistently, so stay tuned, stay safe out there, and as always, just enjoy the hobby. Pose your action figures, play with them, enjoy them as much as you possibly can. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.